Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is JGOD. In today's video, we're going to focus on the 10 best weapons in Call of Duty Black Ops 4 after the 1.13 update. So in today's video, we're going to focus on 14 out of the 31 total weapons because I was able to create a top 10 list, but since there was a handful of weapons I couldn't leave off the list, we have a few honorable mentions. I'm sure most of you know this, but in case you forget, please remember to hit that like button if you do enjoy any part of the video. And then if you are a brand new viewer or one of those 75% who keep coming back to my videos but haven't yet subscribed, if you do enjoy the content, please remember to hit that subscribe button with notifications on so you can find your way back to the channel. So number 10 on my list is going to be the Vapr, and honestly this happens to be one of my favorite weapons. I really enjoyed it in the beta, enjoyed it in the beginning of the game, but once they nerfed high caliber on it, it kind of became that average to below average rifle because so many of the other rifles in the game are just significantly better. So I know there's a few of you out there that probably put it higher on your list, and there's probably a few out there that wouldn't even add it to this list because maybe you think it has funky recoil. Just keep in mind that weapons at this point in the list could easily bump up or down just depending on your preferences and playstyle. Because obviously if I titled this video the best running gun weapons or the best 10 camping weapons, it would be a completely different list. So the next weapon of focus is actually an honorable mention, and this is the Hades LMG. And overall I really like the Hades a lot. The only drawback in my opinion is that long distance recoil. If you're pretty much close to medium range, this weapon excels, and it even has a lot of the nice attachments I like. This hybrid mag, suppressor. It also has relatively good movement, especially for it being an LMG. And I would almost bet if this weapon got a buff to its recoil so it actually reduced the recoil, it would compete with the Titan for the #1 LMG in the game. And that's going to bring us to the number 9 weapon on the list, and it's going to be the Saug 9mm SMG. And this one I would have ranked much higher before it got the nerf. I think the double stock and the additional movement speed it already had inherently built in was just a little too much. That made it slightly overpowered. In the competitive scene, it was almost broken, and now that they've kind of tweaked it a little bit, I think it's just an average SMG. I think that the meta overall in the game kind of hinders it a little bit because in this game, rifles pretty much reign supreme. The damage output, especially when someone's running body armor, it's very hard to compete if you're running an SMG, especially at range. Personally, the only thing I think they need to change on this weapon in its current state is to adjust its ammo capacity, and they really can't do much. They could bump it up slightly or whatever the case is. But since you have Fast Mags 1, Fast Mags 2, kind of ends up being an issue. I would say completely remove Fast Mags 1, remove Fast Mags 2, and introduce hybrid mags into the rotation. But that's just my opinion. What are your guys' thoughts? Let me know down in the comment section below. What would you do to change the Saug, or do you think it's perfectly balanced? And that's going to bring us to our next honorable mention, which is the Daemon 3XB. And I know it's probably going to sound funny to say considering it's on the honorable mention list, but I actually think it's one of the best weapons in the game. And the only reason not more people are using it is because it does require a little bit more skill. You do have to line up your shots. You do have to have a relatively fast trigger finger, so you can go ahead and spam that trigger as fast as possible. So as long as you can do both of those things, this weapon's going to excel against the other SMGs, especially at those medium to long ranges. And unfortunately with this weapon, it was kind of vaulted with the previous event, and now they've added it as an MK2 variant. So if you're lucky enough to get that in a reserve crate, more power to you, but anyone playing the game brand new, you will not get this weapon unless you're incredibly lucky. So that's probably another reason there's no way it can make the top 10 list. And the next weapon on that list, taking the number 8 spot, is going to be the Spitfire. And if I'm being 100% honest, you can kind of probably switch this one with the Saug from 8th and 9th place because they're pretty even in the current meta. I think the Spitfire requires a little bit more skill because you do have to manage that recoil, especially at those medium to long range distances. But if you play this weapon very smart, you're going to be able to close those distances and insta-melt people at those very close ranges. And even though this weapon received a similar number of nerfs to the Saug 9mm, I think overall this one is perfectly balanced where it's at. I think before the update, it was just a little bit too easy to use. Almost anyone could pick up. You had a lot of excess ammo, so you were able to just get those feeds. So in my opinion, the time I was able to play with it after the update, it is significantly more balanced. I never felt like I was super overpowered. I had to really think about how I moved around the map because I wanted to get in that shotgun range where I can literally insta-melt players. So we're still moving along on the list, and the next honorable mention is actually going to be the MX9. And I think this weapon is way more balanced. I don't think it's overpowered. I don't think it's really on the weak side. I think it's more average, middle of the road, which gives it an honorable mention. With 31 weapons, middle of the pack is that honorable mention, right just outside of that top 10 list. I think this weapon's pretty popular for a few different reasons. One, it's a very low unlock. You basically get it once you are able to create a class. you'll have access to the MX9. And since it was probably a little overpowered in the beta, I think a lot of people gravitated towards it. So let me know, do you guys think this is a top 10 weapon, or do you think it deserved just an honorable mention? And that's gonna go ahead and bring us to the number 7 ranked weapon on this list, and that is the ICR rifle. And the ICR has been one of those weapons that has been consistent since the game launched. Obviously it received a light nerf right at the beginning of the game because it was just a little overpowered, but they tuned it and they balanced it the right way. I think it's an all-around good weapon. I don't think it's overpowered in one area, well, maybe with the exception of its accuracy. I think its accuracy is almost a little too good, especially if you equip grip 1 and 2, but that's a different story. I think it's been a laser beam since the game launched, but Call of Duty always seems to have those weapons. In Infinite Warfare, we had the NV4. Inside World War II, we had the STG. Both were pretty much laser beams at those medium to long ranges. The other nice thing about the ICR is that it's included as part of that competitive meta. So if you have played competitive anyway, you'll see the ICR pop up. And based on how it is in the current game's meta, I don't think it'll ever see a nerf or a buff again for the remainder of the game's life cycle. And the next weapon comes in as an honorable mention, and the weapon we're going to be talking about is the Cordite SMG. And I think an above average player will typically like the Cordite because you can actually throw on that belt feed operator mod, or you can use this weapon in a few different ways. And I think the biggest drawback for the Cordite is that it's in the SMG category, because although it will have a little bit more maneuverability because it is an SMG, it's going to fail to win a lot of those gunfights, especially at those medium to long ranges, just because the time to kill in this game is so long. So although I'm a huge fan of the Cordite, I don't actually use it a lot because of those specific reasons. So now we're going to be jumping into the number 6 ranked weapon on this list, and that's going to be the KN57. And one thing I did want to give you a quick heads up on is in the description, I'm going to link best class setups for a lot of the weapons I have in this video, because I have done best class setup videos on about 7 out of the 10 weapons that are in the top 10. So feel free to check that out if you're looking for a particular best class setup. So the KN57 didn't receive a huge buff, but because of other weapons receiving nerfs, it kind of got boosted up a little bit, and it moved probably from about the 10th spot all the way up to 6th. And when it comes to the KN57, the damage output is way up there. The accuracy, especially at long distances, is still pretty good. Maybe not as accurate as the ICR, but it gets the job done. If you're someone who's playing the game, maybe hasn't really played too much with the KN57, I highly recommend it, especially if you kind of want to mix it up a bit, because it is a very reliable rifle. So the next weapon taking that number 5 spot is actually the Maddox rifle, and a lot of you maybe would have thought that this would have dropped further down the list, but in case you guys didn't know, at first this weapon got a nerf, which I think a majority of people know. Everyone got the nerf and they were like, man, the Maddox is garbage. But since the community outrage was so vocal, especially in the competitive community, they went ahead and reverted a little bit of the recoil nerf and kind of rebuffed it back up. So overall, the weapon is nowhere near as good as it used to be, but it's not as bad as it was after that first nerf. I think all the tweaks really did is made it fit more into the rifle category, because it's no longer one of the best SMGs in the game as a rifle, and those incredibly far distance shots require a little bit more recoil management. Not going to be as accurate as the ICR at range, so it's going to be a little harder to melt. You're going to have a little bit of trigger discipline with burst firing or whatever the case is. And just keep in mind, this is the fine line where the list goes from pretty balanced. I think pretty much everything in the list so far is fairly balanced. Nothing's broken, nothing's overpowered. I think it's been balanced appropriately. When we get into this top 4 list, I think these are weapons that more than likely will need a little bit of nerfs, or the weapons I've talked about so far need buffs. So next up, taking that number 4 spot is going to be the Titan LMG. I know it's a big surprise to everyone. The Titan is at the top of the list still, even though it got a fake nerf. And I know there's a bunch of Titan users out there that are going to be using this weapon on a regular basis still. And the main reason for that is because it really didn't get a nerf. At the end of the day, all it did was reduce the damage profile slightly, so it is always a 4-shot kill weapon. Previously, before the update, technically you can get a 3-shot kill if you landed all 3 headshots, but that's not too practical. They went ahead and nerfed the movement speed, but that only affects people who move, and most people who use Titan LMGs kind of camp up in corners, so it doesn't really affect them. And whatever change they made to flinch seems negligible. So in my honest opinion, they need to nerf this weapon to the point that it's not even in the meta. I think the weapons I've talked about so far, I'm perfectly fine running into all those weapons on a regular basis, but some guy camping in a window with a thermal Titan is not a lot of fun. The other part that's kind of broken is even though they went ahead and nerfed FMJ2, this weapon is still really good at shooting streaks. You don't even need to carry a launcher if you want to shoot down streaks. Just pull out your double FMJ Titan, shoot down the UAV, it takes a couple shots, counter UAV, and whatever other streak, you can laser them down pretty quickly. So hopefully I don't get too many dislikes on expressing my opinion about the Titan, but let's go ahead and move on to the next weapon, and that is the Swordfish. And the Swordfish is going to take that number 3 spot. I don't think this weapon has ever been perfectly balanced, because a weapon that can kill you with a single burst if you're using pentaburst or high caliber can never really be balanced, especially if you gotta land 7, 8, 9 shots with an SMG. How do you balance that? You really can't. And at the end of the day, this is not really going to change. I think they have it fixed in a certain way. The interesting thing will be to see how this weapon actually plays out in competitive, because it'll probably actually be used in the next tournament, especially with all the balancing that was done to the Maddox and some of the other weapons like the Saug. I think we're going to find out pretty quickly if this weapon's going to receive a nerf or other weapons that I've already talked about will receive buffs. And that's going to go ahead and bring us to the number 2 weapon in Call of Duty Black Ops 4, which is the Auger DMR. And this is one of the weapons that I think had no business being buffed. I think it was perfectly balanced the way it was, and especially with all the rebalancing they did, I was thinking it would have been perfectly fine. And everyone, when they were looking at the patch notes and seeing that this weapon was getting a buff, everyone was like, hey, that weapon is going to be overpowered. And it is definitely broken. You land 2 shots to the chest and above. When someone again has to land 6 shots, it makes it very hard to deal with. And the main reason it wasn't too broken before the balancing update is because it was very unforgiving. If you missed shots, your time to kill was going to be drastically increasing, which meant that you probably were going to lose the gunfight. In the current scenario, where the rate of fire has been boosted for its regular rate of fire as well as double tap, the time to kill is in that spot where it's just a little too fast in my opinion. And that's going to bring us to the number 1 weapon on this list, and that is the Rampart. And the Rampart has probably been the most overpowered, most broken weapon in the entire game since launch. And I'm not sure why it slips under the radar. I know on my last video where I kind of ranked this one really highly, a lot of people called me an idiot for ranking it so high. But I can promise you, if you're using high cal 1, high cal 2, and you have relatively good recoil management, that is all you need to destroy anyone in any lobby. So hopefully you enjoyed the video enough to hit that like button, regardless if you agree or disagree with the entire list. And if you are brand new to the channel, make sure you do hit that subscribe button so you can find your way back. And like I said in the video, a lot of the best class setups will be found in the description below. Appreciate all the support. Thank you for watching. And as always, have a great day.